Welcome to Be the Light 365. I'm Pastor Jay. Today we're going to talk about being a far right and far left Christian. You might want to know what I'm saying about this, but I'm going to read Luke chapter 11, verse 46. And woe to you lawyers, for you load men with burdens hard to bear, and you yourselves do not touch burdens with one of your fingers. What Jesus is talking about here is sometimes we can be so religious that we don't even see the truth. And that's what Jesus came to preach, was the truth. That he's the Son of God, that he's come to save the world. But we got all these things about, just like the Pharisees does, we always get this mixed up attitude that, well, you have to do what our religion says before you can do what God says. Well, that's true. That's the same thing Pharisees. When you start putting rules and regulations on everything a person does, that's when you find trouble. You know, I was talking to some friends, and people had protested a get-together for a concert, for a Christian concert that came out, and he said people were protesting it. And I'm thinking, why were they protesting? You know, a Christian concert. I know the bands that playing, they seem like good people and good Christians because I've heard them, their interviews and talking. I don't know them personally, so that's another thing. You don't never know anybody personally until you know them. So, but they got interrupted because there was people protesting because they thought that their religion says no music should be played. So all music played by Christians are evil. It gets me sometimes how people put religion before God. How I've seen pastors say, well, you got to wear this or you got to wear that because that's what God says. God says dress moderately. In other words, if you come to church and all you have to wear is a little mini skirt and all that because that's all you have because you're trying to change your life. God always changes those people's hearts, just like anything else. God changes you from being your old way to a new person. So that's the problem that we sometimes have as Christians, is we get attitudes that we are right all the time. And that's not true. God's always right. God's always good. God makes the rules. We don't. But like this here with the Pharisees, you know, if you ever read this, there's a lot of woes. And the reason why you think is because the Pharisees kept putting in stuff on people. More taxes, more this, more, you know, you dress a certain way. You got to look a certain way. You can't do this. You can't do that. I'll tell you one thing. Jesus healed a blind man. That blind man was naked when he came to him. Jesus didn't tell him, oh boy, you can't come to me. You got to go put your clothes back on. He didn't say that. What he said was, come on to me. He didn't care what the guy was dressed as. He just seen a heart. And that's the problem with us, is we see what, and if you read over into James and you read over into some of the stuff where he talks about like the people coming in. He said, you know, you see a rich person coming in and they're dressed all fine. You say, well, come here and sit down right here. But then you see a poor person say, oh, well, just go ahead and get to the back of the pews. That's a problem. That's a heart problem. That's a bad heart problem because you're picking persons. And Jesus was never how's he puts it, respecter of persons. And the reason why, because Jesus never seen the person, he's seen the heart. That's why he asked the naked blind man, he said, just come on. He said he didn't care. Why? Because he's seen the heart. Our problem is we don't see the hearts here lately. We're like the far left and the far right, how they're just like in politics. And I don't like talking about politics because that's a bad thing, you know. But in politics, you have someone that if you don't abide by my rules, then you're wrong. But there's only one rule about being a Christian, and that's God's rules. God says love your neighbor, love your brothers and sisters, and even love your enemies. You don't have to like them, you don't have to hang around with them. That's he never says you have to hang around with these people, but he says you have to love them. And some things that if you get aggravated about something, don't try to put it on somebody else. Worry about yourself. He told Peter in the back of in John, last chapter, he said, Peter asked him about John, who was following. He said, well, what about that man? Jesus had a good thing. You don't worry about that person. You worry about yourself. You worry about what I've got for you. And that's the best rules that you can think of, is worry about yourself and what God has purpose for you, and don't worry about somebody else's purpose. Don't put your rules because you think that you're right. Religion's what got Jesus on the cross. Let's just be Christians. Let's be what Jesus told us to be. Let's follow his rules and not a bunch of other people's rules. Jesus said, I don't put no other burdens. Matter of fact, my burdens are easy. He said, just love me in your heart. Believe in your heart that I am the Son of God, that I will die on the cross, and I was resurrected. And he was. So as long as you believe in Jesus, and believe that the Father sent him, then you're good. But when you start saying, well, I can't be a Christian because I don't believe that you're supposed to have music, or I don't believe this music is good, or this preacher, I've had a lot of that here lately, is preachers putting down other preachers. Well, worry about your flock. If you worry about your flock, then you ain't got to worry about then you ain't got to worry about nothing else, because Jesus got that handled. Don't worry about the other preacher over there doing his thing. If he ain't doing right, I like what in Acts, one of the Pharisees said about Peter and them when they got him. He said, if God's got it good, if this is for God, then we couldn't stop it if we tried. So why try to stop something now? If God will stop God will put an end to what he don't like. I hope you have a blessed day. I hope you learned something on this. Hope you comment down below. I probably will get a lot of comments, but it don't matter. God's always good. I hope you have a blessed, and hope you have a great day.